Hey everyone, you're listening to InfoQuench with Jeff
and Amy,
a podcast with tips to make your life easier.
Covering pop culture, parenting, travel, minimalism, and more. Hey honey, they're coming with the bill. How much do you think we should tip?
I don't know. I mean, it was a pretty good meal. It was pretty great service.
Yeah, but the waitress is a little, you know.
No, really?
I think, well, maybe she was just in a bad mood.
Okay, well, I don't know. Let's just tip the regular amount.
What's the regular amount?
A certain percentage, I believe.
Oh. Do you think she was really in a bad mood, or do you think she's just like
I don't know. Maybe she's just having a bad day. You know?
Was she taking her bad day out on us? Are we going to cut her a break?
I don't know.
What did you think of the food? Do you think they spit in the food?
I don't think they spit in the food, no.
Do you think if we tip poorly, they're going to spit in the food next time?
I don't think so. I think that is like a general thing that people think, but I don't think it happens very often.
I don't know. It's a small city. They'll probably remember us.
Maybe. I don't know. I think that we just tip, a certain percentage because that's what's kind of expected, right? Although a lot of people tip because, the service was fantastic and, they want to, they judge however much they want to tip by the service, right?
Okay, a certain percentage. Can you do the math?
I'll just get the calculator out.
All right, sounds good. Hey, everyone, this is Amy.
And I'm Jeff, yeah.
And this episode, in case you haven't guessed it, we're going to talk about tipping.
Yeah, everybody has a different way to go about tipping. And there's that famous scene in Pulp Fiction where they're talking about tipping. Did you see that? You saw the movie.
I did, but I don't remember the scene to which you are referring.
I wish we could play these kinds of things on the podcast so we can use it as a reference because it's just
Well, give us the lowdown. What
was it's basically like they're all out for a meal and they're all these gangsters, whatever, and
Is this like the Mr. White, Mr. Pink scene?
Yeah. Well, it's not. Yeah, it's like, all right, who didn't tip? And then it's like, what's his name? Buscemi's character. He's like, what do I have to tip for? I don't know, like it's just and then they go into these really in-depth like philosophies about tipping.
So really, I mean, none of us really know what we should be tipping.
No, well, there's considering that there's entire cultures, that don't tip. That's part of the culture. They don't want any extra money, Well,
it would certainly make the math a little easier.
It would make the math a lot easier. That's like case in point. One of the countries that you don't tip in is in Korea. When I was there, it took a bit to get used to that, to be honest, because they just didn't feel like they needed to get any extra for what they gave you, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always a lot of talk about what is the minimum wage or the base wage for wait staff and whether or not tips are to top that up so that it's at a reasonable income and should that lie on the business owner who's employing the staff versus the patrons. So it's an interesting conversation. And I wanted to just remind you of a quote that we heard. Anthony Bourdain is one of our faves. We loved Anthony Bourdain. Yeah. We love watching his shows.
Rest in peace, Anthony.
And he had a quote. He said, "If you're a cheap tipper or rude to your server, you are dead to me. You are lower than whale feces."
Yeah, that's... Yeah, when I think when you work in that particular,
industry,
world, or industry. Thank you for trying to find my word. But yeah, like you have a whole different perspective on the way things are. Like I used to work at a pizza joint, and I never got tips, but I was a cook, right? Like the servers got the tips and stuff. So it's just an interesting thing. Who gets tipped? Who gets the tips? Who doesn't?
Yeah, that and often as patrons, we don't really know how the tips are divided up. You don't know whether if you're throwing tips into a jar at the counter, where does that go versus if you put a tip through your point of sale machine when you're paying by credit card.
Yeah.
Does that get divided up?
I've never heard anybody ask. I've never heard anybody say, yeah, does the kitchen get some of these tips or...
No. Well, and I guess the practice is different depending on the establishment. Yeah. And even whether or not you leave it on the table, right? I think people used to do that it was a common practice, right? You leave it on the table, but then you kind of wonder, is someone going to walk by and just steal the tip?
Which happens, but I don't think it happens very often. I really don't.
I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not too. And you don't want to take away from the people who, deserve it.
So I did a little bit of research on common practices on tipping, but before I get into that, I just wanted to touch base on our last episode. We did an episode on acronyms.
Oh, yes.
And there was...
of which I only knew one. Scuba, I believe it was.
And you admitted in that episode that we had... I guess gone to our friend's 40th birthday party the night before, so I think both of us
groggy.
were a little bit off, a little groggy.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clear up the whole smart car discussion because
Oh, yes.
yeah, because I was wrong.
Oh, no.
I know it happens.
What were you wrong about, honey?
Well, I basically was saying that smart car was was developed by a German company, and I sort of was confusing the discussion with talking about Swatch and
I was right about the swatches.
you
though.
were. So I just wanted to clarify for the purposes of the fact that our
We
podcast
don't like to be
is
wrong.
well, nobody likes to be wrong.
No.
But InfoQuench, we try to give good information, and I do research. I usually try to check a few different sources, and anyway, so I just wanted to give you the accurate history of the smart car. So here it goes. The smart car has actually been around since the late 80s.
Late 80s.
And at the time, the company who came up with it was SMH, not short for shaking my head, like the news chasers
I would
would
never
use
even have known
SMH.
that.
But it's actually the company that makes Swatch watches. Swatch watches.
Oh, really? Well, isn't that interesting?
Yes.
So there's a correlation there.
Well, yes, and you were right because Swatch is Swiss.
Yeah.
And so they were the first ones to sort of start up with this whole smart car concept, and they decided to produce the car. So, but they realized that sort of the automobile industry is obviously a very harshly competitive industry that they needed to sort of partner up with somebody. So they tried to combine their efforts with an already popular manufacturer, Volkswagen. And in the early 90s, Volkswagen decided to abandon the project completely, and they focused on designing their own 3-liter car. So then the smart car people, those Swatch people, were out looking for another partner, and that's when they decided to partner up with the German company Daimler-Benz. So that German company, Daimler-Benz, are the makers of Mercedes-Benz. So the Swatch company had always called the smart car, the early smart car, the Swatchmobile, because they were the Swatch makers of Swatch watches. And they partnered up with the German company Daimler-Benz. And so that's when the smart car became the acronym for Swatch Mercedes Art. So the S in smart is for Swatch, the M is Mercedes, and then the rest is art.
That's
It's
strange.
a work of art.
And then so that like spread to like smartphones and smart everything. I know, but like it is funny how funny that says. Oh yeah, you want to use this new piece of technology? It's smart,
Right?
There's no stupid technology.
Well, they consider the smart to be to have its own form, like it's an intelligent technology. But the smart car, smart is actually an acronym. So
Yeah,
for
that's pretty
Swatch
neat.
Mercedes Art. So anyway, I wanted to clear that up because I don't like to have misinformation out there, and
so
it was
now
a bit
you know.
confusing. And I was,
knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe.
There you go.
Back to tipping.
Yeah.
So there's a company called Square. If anybody who, if you're a small business owner or a large business owner, you may use Square. They do the point of sale app, mobile payment solution. So if you're looking to, have people pay by credit card for your product or service,
they use that
Square
format
is one of the
at,
companies that does it.
They use that format at Second Spin Records,
Oh, okay.
which is an amazing spot locally to pick up your records. Everybody, it's on Westmoreland Road. Check them out. Just a little plug. You got to plug the local brick and mortar stores. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Particularly the record store. Jeff loves his records.
I do. Although, what was the last record we bought? It was one for you.
Yes. Tomato, tomato.
Tomato, tomato.
Yes.
Such a great album. Canary in the Coal Mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
A great local band, and they do an amazing cover of Aha's "Take on Me."
You know what? Maybe they'll let us like play it on the podcast if we get permission. You never know.
Yeah, maybe.
I never even really thought of that.
It
Maybe
is
we'll play it
so-
on the next one.
I love the cover. And very few songs when I hear a cover, I like it more than the original, but this one I love it more than the original.
You really
it just
do,
gives me goosebumps every time I hear it.
That's good.
So anyways, if you haven't
Crazy
checked
asides.
it out, it's on YouTube, Tomato and Aha's cover, Take on Me.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So Square. Yeah, so it's a mobile payment solution. But the reason I bring it up is because they did a bunch of research on tipping. So they dug down, got the data, got the stats on what people are tipping.
And more recent versions of this kind of data, correct?
Right. Well, it was 2018. So just last year, they did a tipping trend report.
What did they find out?
And they focused on Canada. And I often hear when people talk about tipping, I usually hear 15 to 20%.
That's what I've heard too.
I think that's pretty common.
Right.
And often when you're, they presented with a suggestion on the machine, it's usually in that range, right? I think maybe 12, 15, and 20, or 15, 18, and 20. And the standard, so they did an average, what the standard tip would be that's used, like what's chosen through their machines.
Right.
Across Canada, it's 13.8%.
13.8, so not too far from 15.
No, so it's not overly surprising. And so the highest is PEI. So Prince Edward Island had 15.2% as their average tip. The lowest was British Columbia. With
when you go to the options
13.4.
on the point of sale, do you go to like the percentage or do you go to amount?
Well, that's interesting. It depends.
Okay.
And often when we're out, I ask you to pay because...
Yeah.
well,
I go to amount every time.
Well,
I never do percentages for whatever reason.
I don't like the stress of deciding the tip. Now, Jeff and I share, like, our finances are all combined and everything, so we share a bank account. So it's just really whoever is going to actually go through the process of, paying by the credit card. And
it always makes me look good too when I'm the one that's paying.
Yeah, there you go. I'm in. That's what I live for, is to make you look good.
That's right, baby.
But no, I just. When I'm done a meal, I just don't like the added stress of, okay, now I've got to figure out how is the service and what's the math around this. And I just,
you go to
I'm
percentage.
I'm always just thankful when you look after it because I just don't want to. But you often will consult with me and say, what do you think? Was the service good? Kind of how we opened up this episode was we had that discussion. That's a discussion we have often after we have service.
It's usually pretty good service though. There's been like very rarely do we have bad service at a restaurant.
Yeah, it is very rare.
There was that one particular restaurant which we won't name remember when they slapped the check down on us and then took off?
I know. They just sort of threw it on the table on the way by.
Like, here, this is what you owe.
But credit to that restaurant. It was a local restaurant here in St. John, New Brunswick, and I don't think we go there quite often.
We
never saw the same waiter
had that
there. He was only there the one time. Good on the establishment. They must have picked up on the fact that type of attitude was taking place and dealt with it. So, so when they looked at the averages, PEI being the highest, BC being the lowest, but there really was less than a 2% difference between the two. So really 15% holds true as being the average in Canada for tipping. Yeah, it makes sense. So then you kind of look at what do you tip for specific services. So you asked me, do I tip percentage versus dollar amount? And bars are an interesting concept because people actually will tip
for all their drinks rather than just one.
Well, they'll tip differently for a beer or some sort of free pour drink versus a cocktail.
Oh, interesting. So the free pour gets more of a tip because there's more of a...
No, less. So for instance, if you're buying something on tap and they're really just pouring it into a glass, there's minimal work involved. Yeah. So in Canada, the typical standard tip would just be $1 per drink.
Okay, yeah.
Or $1 a beer.
$1 a beer, yeah.
But if you're getting a mixed cocktail, like a martini or something, that takes a lot
something
more
that takes
work,
sweat,
right?
makes the bartenders...
Well, there's a full-on recipe.
Right. Yeah.
If you're getting a mojito, they're muddling. If you're, getting a martini that's shaken and they've got garnishes, there's a lot more to it. So people tend to go more toward the percentage, the same way they would tip on a meal or... with a percentage tip on a cocktail, whereas with a free pour drink like a beer or something that's just on tap, they'll just tip $1 or $2 per drink.
Isn't that interesting? I would never have thought that. I thought it would just be across the board, But that calls into question, do we tip a certain amount because of the work that's involved for our service? Like,
well, it makes sense that we would.
But that's not the case, because you could go through a drive-through at McDonald's or whatever, and there's somebody preparing all that food, and then they hand it to you out the window. It's like, we never tip at McDonald's, but yet we tip when we get a coffee or something.
That's a strange practice, isn't it? Because I think it's really common to tip at Tim Hortons but not at McDonald's.
Or I just never understood how the parameters are set up where people decide, where society has decided when to tip and when not to tip, who to tip, who not to tip, you know?
Do you remember not too long ago there was a big thing on the news around Tim Hortons? I think it was in Ontario, where there was a particular franchise owner who decided that he didn't, or he
no
or
more
she,
tipping.
actually, I don't know if it's a he or she, didn't want to allow people to tip their employees.
I do remember that.
And
I think that's
there was
across the board
full-on
now,
outrage around that. People lined up outside
Really?
the locations and
that.
tipped people after they left their shift, because they felt so strongly that those employees deserve their tips. And I think a lot of times people will round up. So they price, depending on how if a coffee, for instance, is priced at $1.86.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly what the price would be. They'll round up to a toonie, right?
Yeah,
it's just easy.
In Canada, that's our $2 coin, everybody. It's called a toonie. The one is called a loonie. Most of the people listening to our show listen from Canada anyway, so shout out to Canada.
We got a few people from the U.S., but toonies and loonies. That's great. We have great names for our currency.
Oh man, no wonder we get made fun of so much by the Daily Show, and I love it though. I bask in it. I love it when we're
Canadian.
chastised for being Canadians. I love it.
So why do we tip at Tim Hortons? Maybe it's because, I'm sure there are people who go to McDonald's daily, but people who go to Tim Hortons usually are those daily customers. I wonder if there's sort of like a loyalty of you're going to see this person every morning.
Over and over.
You're building a relationship. You want to make sure your coffee's made well. I don't know how I guess there's probably some way they can screw it up. But maybe
anything
there's
can be
just
screwed
sort of
up,
that,
honey. Anything.
Maybe they're just building that relationship by tipping consistently because they're going to Timmy's.
That's the kind of world we live
We also
in.
call it Timmy's, not just Tim's.
Timmy's. Well, you're getting the 100% Canadian version of our podcast this time, everybody.
I was in the elevator at work, and a colleague who had gone to Tim Hortons first thing in the morning, so they had a Tim Hortons cup in their hand, and they were like, they were complaining because the opening of the cup was lined up with the seam. So there's sort of a spot where the paper cup comes together on the side, and it creates a seam.
I see what you mean, yeah.
So where you open
seam.
it, so when you pick up the little spot on the plastic lid where you sip out of, that was lined up with the seam.
I know what you mean.
And they were complaining about that. They said, I hate that because I don't like to put my lip against the seam. And I said,
glue.
Well, but what I said was interesting is that I had heard from a Tim's employee that they were supposed to do that because if you put that seam under another spot on the lid, it doesn't seal completely and your cup will drip.
Oh, really?
So they're supposed to put the seam on the opening.
Why can't they just make a cup that doesn't drip, no matter where you put the cover on? It doesn't make any sense to me.
And either way, they're not good for the environment. But, it's just...
They should be.
It's interesting because something as small as that might be a reason why someone might not tip.
Yeah, that's
they might
true.
be like, they're putting it in the wrong spot and I have to switch my lid every time. But anyways.
People find the littlest reasons not to tip.
So, but McDonald's, I don't know of anybody who tips at McDonald's or Wendy's or any of if you're getting basically a fast food meal.
Not that I'm at McDonald's a lot, but I've never seen
Subway.
Fast food places get tips, really. I mean, whatever. There's always a cup out though for tips.
Well, that's right. I think McDonald's would have the Ronald McDonald House or and I might be apt if I had some change to put some,
I just find it interesting though that we tip for certain, services and not others.
So that company, the Square company, the payment solution company, looked at just other services. So we tend to tip very consistently between restaurants and bars. And when I say consistently, around 15%, outdoor markets.
But someone can paint your entire house and you don't tip them. I mean, I know it costs enough to get your house painted, but that's quite a service.
Well, yeah. So Is that because they're, professional tradespeople?
I don't know.
Is it because we feel the service itself is
It's-
already valued enough?
It's expensive
we're paying
enough.
that we're
Yeah, I think that's the way it was with us anyway, honey. When we got our house painted, it was like, it wasn't even a discussion whether or not we were going to tip. It was just, this is costing us enough.
People aren't really tipping like their plumbers or their electricians that I'm aware of.
No, I don't think so.
If it's different, if you're people listening, if you're tipping your tradespeople, let us know on social media. I'd be interested to know that, because I don't think that that's a common practice at all.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about massages.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this conversation with somebody recently too. I mean, if you're getting a massage, say you're at a resort and you're getting a relaxation massage on the beach, you probably will tip, right? You're down south, you're just getting, maybe a 20 or 30 minute massage. You're probably going to tip a few dollars American. But if you're getting a massage here from like a registered massage therapist, a lot of people don't tip the same way. It's because
but people do tip though. Like whenever I have gotten a massage or whatever, and I've always tipped. It's kind of expected. I always thought it was, isn't it?
Well, I've tipped some, but there was a point in time where I worked at a place where massage was covered through my insurance.
Yeah.
So there was no exchange of any kind of payment at the end of the session.
So you just get up and leave.
Yeah. So it would have been, I felt like it was almost like a medical service.
Right.
It seems strange to tip. So there is some common thoughts around this. So, and Globe and Mail did a whole article just around spas.
It's funny. Somebody can fix your eyes, so you can see properly and you don't tip them. But someone like rubs your body, in a massage, you tip them.
That's true. You're not tipping your family doctor.
It's just so
Thanks for the penicillin.
Yeah, I know. Anyway,
I'll leave a toonie on the counter on my way by.
Everything that anybody does for you is kind of a service. It's kind of like, but how do you know? I mean, there's the obvious ones that when you need to tip, like a bellman or whatever. You always tip, right? They bring up your luggage. You always tip. If you didn't tip, you're just a jerk.
And so CNN Travel says that the average for bellhops is
Look at you with all the facts.
$1 to $2 a bag.
$1 to $2 a bag.
It really makes you think about. I always think about how many bags I'm going to take because I know the airport's going to charge me, but I don't really think about the fact that I'm going to have to.
So 2 bags, you round it up to $5.
So
that's interesting.
CNN did like a travel article specifically on Canada, so they looked at Canadian practices, and they said $1 to $2 for bellhops. When we look at spas, so I mentioned Globe and Mail did a whole thing on spas. It's very consistent with restaurants. They felt in Canada it was customary to do like a 10% tip for standard service, 15% if it was, very personalized, and if it was like above the norm, they went above and beyond with stellar service that you should be doing a 20% tip. So really consistent with what people will often say for restaurants. They said that, if you're going to a spa and you're getting different services, so you might go and get your hair colored. You may also get a manicure. I don't know. Maybe you're really loaded. You just spend the whole day at the spa with a whole sequence of services. Yeah. They say that you should tip each individual person, accordingly for the service.
That's interesting because, just to give a different example, like people take the city bus all the time and you put your money in, I think it's $2.75 a ride or something like that. And no one tips the bus driver every time they get on the bus. It's just
thanks for all that great driving.
It's just interesting to me. Like
you didn't kill us, so here's an extra quota.
Maybe what we should do is just start tipping the wrong people and see what happens.
I know. But I think some people would find it almost insulting.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, it's true. It's like here's $2.75 to get on, and here's a quarter for you. Here's a quarter for you, Mr. Bus Driver.
When we go to if you go to like wild. An all-inclusive resort down south, often we tip the housekeeping staff.
Yeah.
But I don't do that. Like if I stayed at a hotel here, but not locally, I wouldn't leave $1 on the pillow for the staff who clean the room.
That's a daily tip though, because they do something daily.
Yeah, but why do we do it when we travel down south but not here? Is it because we assume that the wages are lesser down there and that they need that top up for their income?
I think what it honestly boils down to is that we as human beings look at a service, and then if we think, okay, they're taken care of on their own, we don't tip. Do you know what I mean? Because that's why people tip when they go to restaurants, because people think, okay, waiters and waitresses perhaps aren't getting paid enough, so we're going to help them out a little bit and give them a little bit more of a tip because of the great service.
Well, that's huge in the U.S., right? Because their wages were, I don't know if it's still that way, but traditionally they were significantly lower than even minimum wage.
Yeah.
And they depended on the patron to give that person a living wage through tips.
Yeah, which is really kind of unfair from the employers. Like, the employer should be giving the employee enough money to live and not have to feel like they need to get tips. But it's been such a traditional, customary thing to tip for years and years and years that they just rolled it all in, right?
I know.
Kind of. I don't know. Maybe I'm being insensitive. I'm just trying to figure it all out,
Well, and is it an incentive that they give better service because of that? I don't know. Again, we don't tip our certain, tradespeople or our physicians or our other professional services, and they give great service.
But the reason I think we don't tip, the optometrist when we get our eyes looked at, is because we feel, okay, they're doing well. We don't need to give them an extra, $4.
And if we did, do you think they're going to be like, we're going to take a little extra care with your LASIK eye surgery and make sure we're really getting it done,
We'll make sure we aim properly. Yeah.
Take a little extra time setting up the equipment.
Or like dentists, you get a filling. It's like they're going to do a good job. Not because you're tipping though, because it's what they do.
So I also had a conversation with somebody recently about the whole idea of the fact that certain point of sale machines prompt you to tip.
Oh, yeah.
So there are, I don't know if people have noticed this, but when you go to certain restaurants, it'll prompt you to say, you basically have to say you don't want to tip. It's not like sometimes you pay through the machine and then you decide whether or not you're going to leave cash on a table or whatever. But there are machines that'll make you say, yes, I want to tip, or no, I'm a cheap ass.
Another interesting thing is there's a pizza joint in town, and when I go to pick up a pizza that and it always prompts you, do you want to tip? I always say no, because I'm just picking up a pizza. I'm paying for it and leaving. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if I'm going in and I get the exact same pizza and they just walk it over to me and give it to me, and then I tip. It's a really interesting thing.
And if we're getting delivery, we tip for delivery as well.
Oh yeah.
Or for cabs, taxis.
Yeah.
And so they're a lot of merchants will say that they'll set up their point of sale machines to prompt people to tip, because they said that making that change, asking people whether they want to tip, increases their tips by 30%.
Oh, big time. Yeah, because it's the very first thing you see. Oh, I feel so guilty if I don't tip.
But it's kind of like a bullying.
It's
guilt tipping.
Yeah, it's more of like a conditioning thing. Do you know what I mean?
So this is something I found fascinating from a math perspective, because we have our taxes here in New Brunswick are 15% exactly,
ridiculous.
Right? So we have a harmonized sales tax here in New Brunswick, Canada. And so 15% is also about the same as the average tip. So a lot of people will say tip the tax. So if you're tipping the tax, you're tipping the amount of your bill before tax, right? Because you're basically tipping that same amount. Well, a lot of point of sale machines, when they suggest the percentages to you, so if they say, do you want to tip 10% or 15% or 20%? They're basing those percentages on the after-tax amount.
Oh, yeah. No, that's after the tax. Yeah.
So they do the calculation maybe a little bit differently than if you were just doing it in your head. And it may not seem like a lot, but if you have $100 meal, so say you're tipping on $100 meal. If you do it pre-tax, it's $15.
Wow.
But if you do it post-tax, it's $17.25. So that's, it's like $2.25.
Yeah.
But that's like the price of a cup of coffee. And that's just the difference
Especially
in how...
Especially if you go out for $100 meals every day.
Yes.
That's really expensive.
Well, then you probably don't even care what the cup of coffee is.
Just joking.
But it really is like you're doing a little bit more of a tip. And sometimes there are restaurants that have a tip included.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're traveling, and then so you're like almost doing a double tip.
I have to say we've just hit the tip of the iceberg with this podcast. So we're going to have to revisit this. You know?
I know. I can't wait to hear what other people have to say. We'll do a little post to get a bit of feedback on what your thoughts are on tipping. I know it's a bit of a controversial topic, but hopefully you found this one interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Thanks so much for listening, everybody. It's awesome.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.
Be sure to visit InfoQuench.com to subscribe and catch up on past episodes.
You can also check out InfoQuench on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Till next time.